Ryan Kim had always dreamed of visiting London. At 30 years old, he owned a small martial arts studio in Portland, Oregon. His students loved him because he taught them more than just fighting moves. He taught them respect, discipline, and how to stay calm under pressure. Ryan had earned his black belt 10 years ago, but he never bragged about it. He was the kind of guy who helped old ladies cross the street and always said please and thank you. This Tuesday morning felt special. Ryan stood outside Buckingham Palace with his camera hanging around his neck. He wore his favorite blue jacket, the same one he'd worn when he won his first tournament. The palace looked even more amazing than in the pictures. Tall gates, beautiful architecture, and those famous red-coated guards standing perfectly still like statues. Ryan watched the tourists around him. Kids were running everywhere, taking selfies and laughing. Parents were trying to get the perfect family photo. Everyone seemed excited to be there. But what caught Ryan's attention were the guards. These guys were incredible. They stood there, without moving a muscle even when people tried to make them laugh or react. One guard in particular impressed Ryan. This guy had been standing in the exact same spot for over an hour. His red uniform was perfectly pressed, and his big black hat sat straight on his head. His face showed no emotion at all. Ryan had heard stories about these guards, how they trained for months to stand perfectly still no matter what happened around them. The guard's name was Sergeant Tommy Blackwood, though Ryan didn't know this yet. Tommy had been doing this job for 5 years. He loved serving his country and protecting the royal family. But today was different. Last night, his 8-year-old daughter Lily had been rushed to the hospital. She had been sick for weeks, and the doctors finally found out what was wrong. She needed surgery, and Tommy was scared. Tommy hadn't slept much. His wife called him at 6 in the morning to update him about Lily's condition. The surgery was scheduled for tomorrow, and Tommy wanted to be there, but he had a duty to fulfill today. He couldn't just leave his post, so here he stood trying to focus on his job while his heart worried about his little girl. Ryan didn't know about Tommy's problems. All he saw was a dedicated soldier doing his job perfectly. Ryan respected that kind of discipline. In martial arts, you learn to control your body and mind. You learn to stay focused even when everything around you is crazy. This guard was doing exactly that. The crowd around the palace was getting bigger. Tour buses kept arriving, dropping off more excited visitors. Ryan noticed a group of college kids who seemed louder than everyone else. They were probably around 20 years old, wearing university sweatshirts and carrying beer bottles even though it was only 10 in the morning. These college kids were from America just like Ryan, but they weren't showing the same respect he was. They kept getting closer to the guards, trying to make them laugh. One kid named Brad thought it was hilarious to make faces at the guards. His friend Danny was taking videos, hoping to catch a guard breaking character. "Dude, watch this," Brad said to his friends. "I bet I can make this guy smile." He started, doing silly dances in front of Tommy. When that didn't work, he began making weird noises and gestures. Ryan felt uncomfortable watching this. He had spent years learning about respect and honor in martial arts. What these kids were doing felt wrong, but he didn't want to cause a scene, so he just moved to a different spot to take his photos. The morning sun was getting warmer, and more tourists kept arriving. Ryan found a good spot about 10 feet away from Tommy's position. He wanted to take a respectful photo that showed the guard's dedication and the beautiful palace behind him. Ryan adjusted his camera settings and stepped back to get the perfect angle. Meanwhile, the college kids were getting more aggressive in their attempts to break Tommy's composure. Brad was now walking in circles around the guard, making jokes about his hat and uniform. Danny was filming everything, hoping to create viral content for his social media accounts. "Come on, man, just smile once," Brad called out to Tommy. "We're Americans too, we're practically neighbors." Tommy remained perfectly still, but inside he was struggling. Normally, dealing with tourists didn't bother him. It was part of the job. But today was different. His mind kept drifting to Lily in the hospital. He kept thinking about how scared she must be, wondering if Daddy would be there for her surgery. The stress of worrying about his daughter, combined with lack of sleep, was making it harder to maintain his usual perfect composure. His shoulders felt tense and he had to work extra hard to keep his face expressionless. Ryan noticed the guard seemed more stiff than usual. Maybe it was just the heat, or maybe he'd been standing there too long. Ryan decided to take his photo quickly and move on. He didn't want to add to whatever pressure the guard might be feeling. But as Ryan positioned himself for the shot, he noticed the college kids were getting even more out of hand. Brad had now started making mock military salutes and pretending to march like a soldier. His friends were laughing and encouraging him to do more. Other tourists were starting to notice the disturbance. Some looked annoyed that these kids were being disrespectful. Others seemed entertained by the show. A few people started taking out their phones to record what was happening. Ryan lowered his camera. Something about this situation felt wrong. The guard was just doing his job, and these kids were treating him like entertainment. In martial arts, Ryan had learned that true strength comes from protecting others, not from showing off or being disrespectful. He thought about saying something to the college kids, but he wasn't sure if that would make things better or worse. As a visitor in a foreign country, he didn't want to cause an international incident. But as someone who understood discipline and respect, he felt bad for the guard who had to endure this treatment. The morning was still young, and the palace courtyard was filling up with more and more people. Nobody knew that in just a few minutes everything would change. A simple misunderstanding would turn Ryan's dream vacation into a nightmare, and Tommy's already difficult day would become even worse. Ryan raised his camera again, trying to focus on taking a nice, respectful photo. The college kids continued their annoying behavior. Tommy stood perfectly still, fighting his inner battle between duty and worry about his daughter. None of them could have predicted what was about to happen. Next, Ryan was about to take his photo when things went completely wrong. Brad, the loud college kid, had gotten bored with just making faces at Tommy the guard. He wanted to do something bigger, something that would get more views on social media. He looked around and saw Ryan standing nearby with his camera. "Hey, let's see how close we can get this guy to the guard." Brad whispered to his friend Danny. "It'll be hilarious if we can make them both react." Ryan had no idea what Brad was planning. He was focused on adjusting his camera settings, trying to get the lighting just right. The morning sun was creating beautiful shadows on the palace walls, and he wanted to capture that in his photo. Brad pretended to stumble and bumped into his friend Danny. Danny, who was in on the joke, pushed back playfully, but then Brad deliberately stepped behind Ryan and gave him a hard shove, right between the shoulder blades. Ryan never saw it coming. 1 second he was standing peacefully with his camera, and the next second he was flying forward. The push was so sudden and strong that Ryan completely lost his balance. His camera flew out of his hands and clattered onto the stone ground. Ryan's body was moving forward fast, straight toward Tommy the guard. In that split second, Ryan's martial arts training kicked in automatically. For 10 years he had practiced reflexes and self-defense moves. When you're falling and about to crash into something, your body tries to protect itself. Ryan's hand shot out instinctively to break his fall. He wasn't trying to hit anyone. He was just trying to stop himself from crashing face first into the guard. But because of the angle and the speed, his open palm struck Tommy directly across the left side of his face. The sound was loud, like a clap of thunder in the quiet morning air. Smack! Tommy's big black hat flew off his head and hit the ground with a thud. For the first time in 5 years of guard duty, Tommy staggered backward. His hand went up to his face instinctively. His eyes went wide with shock and confusion. Final. Entire courtyard went dead silent. Tourists who had been chatting and laughing suddenly stopped talking. Kids stopped running around. Even the pigeons seemed to freeze in place. Everyone was staring at Ryan and Tommy with their mouths open. Ryan hit the ground hard, scraping his knees on the rough stone. His blue jacket was torn, and his hands were bleeding slightly from catching himself on the pavement. He looked up at Tommy with complete horror on his face. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," Ryan gasped, trying to get back to his feet. "I didn't mean to. Someone pushed me. I'm so sorry." Tommy stood there, still touching his face where Ryan's hand had struck him. As a trained soldier, Tommy's first instinct was to defend himself. But he could see that Ryan looked just as shocked as he felt. Ryan's eyes showed genuine panic and regret, not aggression. But the tourists around them didn't see it that way. They had only witnessed the moment of impact. They saw what looked like a martial arts expert deliberately striking a royal guard across the face. "Did you see that?" someone shouted. "He just hit the guard." "Get your cameras out," yelled another person. "This is crazy." Within seconds, dozens of phones were pointing at Ryan and Tommy. The clicking sounds of cameras filled the air like a rainstorm. Everyone wanted to capture this unbelievable moment. Brad and Danny, the college kids who had started the whole thing, quietly backed away into the crowd. They looked at each other with worried expressions. This had gone way further than they intended. They had just wanted to play a prank, not cause a serious incident. "Should we say something?" Danny whispered to Brad. "Are you crazy?" Brad whispered back. "Let's get out of here before someone figures out what happened." They slipped away through the crowd, leaving Ryan to face the consequences alone. Ryan was still on the ground, trying to understand what had just happened. His mind was racing. One moment he was taking a peaceful photo, and now he had somehow struck a royal guard. This was like a nightmare, except he was wide awake. "Please, everyone, listen," Ryan called out, getting to his feet slowly. "This was an accident. Someone pushed me from behind. I would never intentionally hurt anyone, especially not a guard who's just doing his job." But his words were drowned out by the excited chatter of the crowd. People were already posting videos on their phones. Some were calling the police. Others were taking more photos of Ryan, who looked disheveled and panicked. Tommy finally found his voice. As a professional soldier, he knew he had to take control of the situation. But he was also shaken. In all his years of guard duty, nothing like this had ever happened. He had been trained to deal with tourists who got too close or made jokes, but not with physical contact. "Step back, everyone," Tommy said in his crisp British accent. His voice was steady, but Ryan could see confusion and concern in his eyes. "Please give us some space." Palace security guards came running from different directions. They had seen the commotion and were responding quickly. 3 guards in different uniforms surrounded Ryan, who was now standing with his hands visible, trying to show he wasn't a threat. "Sir, we need you to come with us," said the lead security officer, a tall man with graying hair. "There's been an incident and we need to sort this out." "Of course I understand," Ryan said, his voice shaking. "But please, you have to believe me. This was a complete accident. Someone pushed me from behind and I was just trying to catch myself from falling." The security guards weren't interested in explanations right now. Their job was to secure the situation first, ask questions later. One guard picked up Ryan's camera from the ground and handed it to him. Another guard retrieved Tommy's hat and gave it back to him. Tommy put his hat back on, trying to restore some dignity to the situation. His face was red where Ryan's hand had struck him, but he wasn't seriously injured. What bothered him more was that his perfect record of composure had been broken, and on today of all days, when he was already worried sick about his daughter. The crowd of tourists was getting bigger, not smaller. Word was spreading quickly that something dramatic had happened at Buckingham Palace. People were running over from other parts of the area to see what was going on. Ryan looked around desperately, hoping to spot the college kid who had pushed him. But Brad and Danny were long gone, disappeared into the sea of tourists. There was no one to back up Ryan's story about being pushed. "This way, sir," the security guard said firmly, gesturing for Ryan to follow him toward a side entrance of the palace. As they walked away, Ryan could hear the crowd talking excitedly behind them. He caught fragments of conversations. "Did you get it on video? I can't believe someone would attack a royal guard. He looked like he knew martial arts or something. This is going to be all over the news tonight." Ryan felt sick to his stomach. This was supposed to be the best day of his London vacation. Instead, it was turning into the worst day of his life. He had no idea that it was about to get much, much worse. Ryan found himself in a small windowless room inside Buckingham Palace. The walls were plain white, and there was just a table with 2 chairs. It felt like something from a police show on TV, except this was real, and he was in serious trouble. Detective Inspector Helen Morrison walked into the room. She was in her 40s with sharp eyes and graying brown hair pulled back in a neat bun. She had been investigating crimes in London for 15 years and had seen all kinds of cases. But this one was unusual. An American tourist, allegedly. Assaulting a royal guard was not something that happened every day. "Mr. Kim," she said, sitting down across from Ryan. "I'm Detective Morrison. We need to talk about what happened out there." Ryan's hands were shaking as he tried to explain his side of the story again. "Detective, I swear on my life this was an accident. I was just trying to take a photo when someone pushed me from behind. I never meant to hurt anyone." "Detective," Morrison looked at the notes in her file. "Several witnesses saw you strike Sergeant Blackwood. The videos are already spreading on social media. Some people are calling you the karate tourist and saying you attacked him on purpose." "Karate tourist?" Ryan felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean, social media?" Morrison pulled out her phone and showed him. Ryan's face went pale as he saw video after video of the incident. The footage showed him hitting Tommy, but because of the camera angles, you couldn't see Brad pushing him from behind. It looked exactly like what everyone thought. A deliberate attack. The comments under the videos were horrible. People were calling him a bully, a coward, and much worse things. Some were even making threats about what they would do if they ever met him. "This is a nightmare," Ryan whispered, putting his head in his hands. "My martial arts school, my students, they're going to see this. Everyone back home is going to think I'm some kind of violent person." Meanwhile, back in Portland, Oregon, Ryan's phone was buzzing non-stop in his hotel room. His assistant at the martial arts studio, Jenny, was trying to reach him. The videos had already made it to America, and people were calling the studio asking if it was really their instructor in the footage. Jenny was getting angry phone calls from parents asking if Ryan was dangerous. Some parents were saying they didn't want their kids learning from someone who would hit a guard. The local news station had even called, asking for a comment about their violent martial arts instructor. Back at Buckingham Palace, Tommy was in the medical office getting checked by a doctor. The doctor, an older man named Dr. Phillips, was examining the red mark on Tommy's face. "Nothing serious, Sergeant Blackwood," Dr. Phillips said. "Just some redness and minor swelling. You'll be fine by tomorrow. But I have to ask, are you feeling all right otherwise? You seem more shaken up than I would expect from such a minor incident." Tommy sat quietly for a moment. He didn't want to admit that his worry about his daughter was making everything feel worse. "I'm fine, doctor, just surprised, that's all. In 5 years of duty, nothing like this has ever happened." Dr. Phillips nodded and made some notes in Tommy's file. "Well, take it easy for the rest of your shift. And if you feel dizzy or have any headaches, come see me right away." Tommy walked back toward his post, but his supervisor stopped him. "Blackwood, you're done for the day. Go home and rest. This incident is going to require paperwork and possibly testimony." For the first time, Tommy felt relieved. He could go to the hospital and check on Lily. But as he walked toward the changing room, he couldn't stop thinking about the look in Ryan's eyes. The American had seemed genuinely horrified by what had happened. Tommy had served in the military for 8 years before becoming a palace guard, and he had learned to read people pretty well. Ryan hadn't looked like someone who wanted to cause trouble. Back in the interrogation room, Detective Morrison was reviewing the case details. The evidence seemed clear. Multiple videos showing Ryan striking Tommy. But something bothered her about the whole situation. She had interviewed hundreds of people who had committed crimes, and Ryan didn't fit the pattern. "Mr. Kim, help me understand something," she said. "You're a martial arts instructor. You teach people self-control and discipline. You have no criminal record, not even a parking ticket. Why would you suddenly decide to hit a royal guard in front of hundreds of witnesses?" "That's exactly my point," Ryan said, leaning forward. "It makes no sense. Why would I throw away my entire career and reputation to hit someone who was just doing his job? I respect what those guards do. I would never hurt someone like that on purpose." Detective Morrison made more notes. "Tell me about the person who pushed you. Can you describe them?" It was one of the college kids who had been bothering the guard all morning. A young guy, maybe 20 years old, wearing a blue university sweatshirt. He had brown hair and was with a group of friends who were all acting pretty immature. Morrison looked up. "We've reviewed the witness statements. Several people mentioned seeing some rowdy American college students earlier, but they seemed to have disappeared after the incident. No one got their names or clear photos of their faces. This made Ryan feel a little hopeful. If the detective was looking into the college kids, maybe she believed his story. "Detective, you have to find them. They can tell you what really happened." But Detective Morrison's expression was serious. "Mr. Kim, even if we find these students and they confirm your story, you still made physical contact with a royal guard. In British law, that's a serious offense. Accident or not, you could face up to 6 months in jail and a significant fine." Ryan felt like the room was spinning. 6 months in jail? In a foreign country? For an accident? What about my flight? Home? I'm supposed to leave London in 3 days. "I'm afraid that's not going to happen," Morrison said. "Your passport will be held until this matter is resolved. You'll need to contact the American embassy and arrange for legal representation." Outside the palace, news vans were starting to arrive. Reporters had caught wind of the story and were setting up cameras. The incident was being described as "American tourist attacks Royal Guard" on the evening news. Ryan's photo from his martial arts studio website had somehow been found and was being shown on TV. Back in Portland, Ryan's students were watching the news in shock. Lisa, a teenage girl who had been taking classes with Ryan for 3 years, was crying. "That's not like him at all," she told her parents. "Mr. Kim taught us that martial arts is about protecting people, not hurting them." Ryan's best friend and business partner Mike was fielding phone calls from reporters. "No comment," he kept saying. "We're trying to reach Ryan to understand what happened." But inside, Mike was worried. The videos looked bad, really bad. Even if Ryan's story was true, would anyone believe it? The footage was so clear, and Ryan's martial arts background made it look like he knew exactly what he was doing. At the hospital, Tommy finally arrived to see his daughter Lily. She was awake and happy to see her daddy. She had no idea about the incident at the palace, and the adults had decided not to tell her anything that might worry her before her surgery. "Daddy, you're early," Lily said with a weak smile. "I thought you had to work all day." Tommy sat beside her hospital bed and held her small hand. "I got off work early today, sweetheart. I wanted to spend time with you before your operation tomorrow." As he sat there with his daughter, Tommy couldn't stop thinking about Ryan. The man's face had shown such genuine remorse and panic. Tommy had been angry at first, but now he was beginning to wonder if there was more to the story than what the videos showed. Back at the palace, Ryan was allowed one phone call. He called his friend Mike, who answered immediately. "Ryan, what the hell is going on? The videos are everywhere and people are going crazy." "Mike, listen to me carefully," Ryan said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I need you to call the American embassy in London. I need a lawyer and I need help. This is all a terrible misunderstanding, but I'm in real trouble here. The whole world thinks you attacked a royal guard, man. The studio is getting hate mail. Parents are pulling their kids out of classes. This is really bad." Ryan closed his eyes and took a deep breath, the way he had taught his students to do when they felt overwhelmed. "I know it looks bad, but I didn't do anything wrong, Mike. Someone pushed me and I accidentally hit the guard while trying to catch myself. You have to believe me." "I believe you, Ryan. You're not capable of hurting someone like that. But proving it is going to be another story." As Ryan hung up the phone, he realized that his nightmare was just beginning. The videos were spreading faster than the truth, and his reputation was being destroyed by the hour. He had no idea that the real story was much more complicated than anyone imagined, and that the truth would eventually come out in a way that nobody expected. Detective Morrison couldn't sleep that night. Something about Ryan's case was bothering her, like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. She had been a detective long enough to trust her instincts, and her instincts were telling her there was more to this story. Early the next morning, she decided to visit the palace again and look at the incident from different angles. She brought her partner, Detective Chris Watson, a younger officer who was good with technology and video analysis. "Helen, the videos are pretty clear," Watson said as they walked through the palace courtyard. "The guy hits the guard. What more is there to investigate?" "That's just it, Chris. Sometimes what looks obvious isn't the whole truth." Look at this from Ryan Kim's perspective. He's a martial arts instructor with a clean record, visiting London for the first time. Why would he suddenly decide to attack a royal guard in front of hundreds of people? Detective Watson shrugged. Maybe he wanted to be famous? These social media people do crazy things for attention. But that doesn't fit either, Morrison replied. I've seen his social media profiles. He barely posts anything, and when he does, it's just photos of his students or inspirational quotes about martial arts. He's not the type who craves attention. They stood in the exact spot where the incident had happened. Morrison closed her eyes and tried to imagine the scene. Ryan had been standing here taking a photo. The college kids had been over there bothering the guard. Then suddenly, Ryan was flying forward. Chris, what if someone did push him? The angle would put the person right here. She pointed to a spot directly behind where Ryan had been standing. But none of the videos show anyone pushing him, Watson pointed out. Because all the cameras were focused on the guard and Ryan. No one was filming the crowd behind him. Morrison pulled out her notebook. We need to find every single camera that might have captured this area. Not just tourist phones, but security cameras, traffic cameras, maybe even cameras from nearby businesses. That afternoon, they spent hours reviewing footage from different sources. Most of the videos showed the same thing, Ryan striking Tommy. But Morrison was looking for something else. She was looking for the moments before the strike. Finally, they found it. A security camera from a building across the street had captured a wider view of the courtyard. The footage was grainy and far away, but Morrison could see figures moving in the crowd behind Ryan just before he fell forward. There, she said, pointing at the screen. Can you enhance that section? Watson worked on cleaning up the video using police software. Slowly, the image became clearer. They could see two young men in university sweatshirts standing behind Ryan. One of them definitely moved toward Ryan just before Ryan fell forward. It's not crystal clear, but it definitely looks like someone pushed him, Watson admitted. But can we prove it in court? And can we identify who did it? Morrison was already thinking ahead. Let's check with immigration. These were American college students, probably here on tourist visas. How many groups of American college kids visited London yesterday? And how many of them went to Buckingham Palace? Meanwhile, at the hospital, Tommy was sitting with his daughter Lily before her surgery. The little girl was nervous, and Tommy was trying to keep her spirits up by telling her funny stories about his job. Daddy, do you ever get scared when you're standing guard? Lily asked. Sometimes, sweetheart. But being brave doesn't mean you're never scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared. As Tommy said these words, he thought about Ryan again. The man had looked terrified after the incident, but he hadn't tried to run away or make excuses. He had immediately apologized and tried to help. Maybe that was a kind of bravery, too. After Lily fell asleep, Tommy decided to call Detective Morrison. He had been thinking about the incident all night, and there were things that bothered him about the official story. Detective, this is Sergeant Blackwood. I wanted to talk to you about what happened yesterday. Of course, Sergeant. How can I help you? I've been thinking about Mr. Kim's reaction after he hit me. I've dealt with aggressive tourists before, and they usually try to justify their behavior or act defiant. But Mr. Kim seemed genuinely shocked and sorry. His first words were an apology. Morrison made notes as Tommy spoke. What else did you notice? Well, the college kids who had been bothering me all morning disappeared right after the incident. That struck me as odd. If they had witnessed an unprovoked attack, wouldn't they have stayed to give statements? That's very observant, Sergeant. We're actually looking into those students right now. Back at the hotel, Ryan was having the worst day of his life. He had been released on bail but couldn't leave London. The American embassy had helped him find a lawyer, but the legal fees were going to cost him everything he had saved. His phone kept buzzing with notifications. The story had gone global, and people all over the world were sharing opinions about him. Most of them were negative. Someone had even created a fake social media account in his name, posting inflammatory comments that made him look even worse. Ryan's business partner Mike called with more bad news. Ryan, I hate to tell you this, but we lost another 12 students today. Parents are scared to bring their kids to classes. The local news wants to do a story about violent martial arts instructors. I don't know how much longer we can keep the studio open. Ryan sat on his hotel bed staring at the ceiling. Everything he had worked for his entire adult life was falling apart because of 30 seconds of misunderstanding. Mike, you might need to think about closing the studio temporarily. I can't let this destroy your life too. Don't talk like that, man. We're going to figure this out. The truth will come out. But Ryan wasn't so sure. The videos were so convincing, and his explanation sounded like something a guilty person would make up. Detective Morrison was having better luck with her investigation. She had contacted immigration and gotten a list of American college groups that had visited London recently. One group stood out, 12 students from State University who had arrived 3 days ago and were staying at a hostel in central London. Chris, let's pay them a visit, Morrison said. They found the college students at their hostel. Most of them were hungover and looked like they had been partying all night. Morrison immediately recognized the two young men from the security footage, Brad Mitchell and Danny Rodriguez. Gentlemen, I'm Detective Morrison, and this is Detective Watson. We'd like to ask you some questions about yesterday's incident at Buckingham Palace. Brad and Danny exchanged worried looks. They had been hoping no one would connect them to what happened. We don't know anything about any incident, Brad said, but his voice was shaky. Really? Because we have security footage showing both of you standing directly behind Ryan Kim just before he struck the Royal Guard. Danny cracked first. Look, we didn't mean for anyone to get hurt. It was just supposed to be a stupid prank. What kind of prank? Morrison asked, taking out her notebook. Brad dared me to push someone toward the guard to see if the guard would react. We thought it would be funny. We didn't know the guy was a martial arts instructor or that he would actually hit the guard. Brad glared at his friend. Shut up. Danny, you're making it worse. No, Brad, this is already worse. That guy is in serious trouble because of what we did. His life is being ruined and we're just sitting here acting like nothing happened. Detective Morrison felt a surge of satisfaction. Finally, they were getting to the truth. So you admit that Brad pushed Mr. Kim? Yes, Danny said, ignoring Brad's angry stare. Brad pushed him from behind. It wasn't the guy's fault at all. He was just trying to catch himself from falling. Morrison smiled for the first time in days. Gentlemen, you're both going to need to come with us to the station. We have some official statements to record. As they led Brad and Danny away, Morrison called Ryan's lawyer with the good news. The truth was finally coming out, but she wondered if it would be enough to repair the damage that had already been done to Ryan's life and reputation. The real question now was whether the world would pay as much attention to the truth as they had to the original story. Morrison had learned from experience that corrections never travel as fast as rumors, but she was determined to make sure Ryan got the justice he deserved. The press conference was scheduled for 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 days after the incident. Detective Morrison stood at the podium in front of a room full of reporters, cameras, and curious onlookers. Ryan sat in the front row with his lawyer, his hands folded nervously in his lap. Ladies and gentlemen, Detective Morrison began, after a thorough investigation, we have uncovered the true facts about the incident at Buckingham Palace involving Mr. Ryan Kim and Sergeant Tommy Blackwood. The room was completely silent. Everyone was waiting to hear what really happened. Mr. Kim did not intentionally strike Sergeant Blackwood. Our investigation has revealed that Mr. Kim was pushed from behind by another individual, causing him to lose his balance and accidentally make contact with the guard while trying to prevent a fall. Murmurs rippled through the crowd of reporters. This was not the story they had been expecting. We have arrested 2 American college students, Brad Mitchell and Danny Rodriguez, who have confessed to the prank that caused this incident. They pushed Mr. Kim as what they called a joke, never considering the serious consequences of their actions. Ryan felt a wave of relief wash over him, but he could also feel the weight of everything that had happened over the past 3 days. His reputation had been destroyed worldwide, his business was failing, and his life had been turned upside down. Detective Morrison continued, Mr. Kim is completely innocent of any wrongdoing. He was simply a tourist trying to take a photograph when he became the victim of someone else's poor judgment. The reporters immediately started shouting questions, but Morrison held up her hand. There's more to this story that I think you'll find interesting. At that moment, the back door of the room opened and Tommy Blackwood walked in. He was not in his guard uniform, but wearing a simple suit. The room went silent again as everyone recognized him as the guard who had been struck. Tommy walked to the front of the room and asked if he could speak. Morrison stepped aside and handed him the microphone. "My name is Sergeant Tommy Blackwood," he said, his voice clear and strong. "I'm the guard who was involved in this incident. I want everyone to know that Mr. Kim is a good man who was caught in a terrible situation that wasn't his fault." Ryan looked up at Tommy with surprise. He hadn't expected the guard to speak on his behalf. Tommy continued, "But there's something else I want to share with everyone. The day this incident happened was one of the worst days of my life. Not because of what happened with Mr. Kim, but because my 8-year-old daughter Lily was in the hospital, scheduled for surgery the next day." The room was captivated by Tommy's words. This was a side of the story no one had heard before. "I was stressed and worried sick about my little girl. I had barely slept the night before and I was struggling to maintain my composure during my guard duty. When Mr. Kim accidentally struck me, it actually did me a favor in a way I never expected." "How so?" asked a reporter from the front row. "Because the incident meant I was relieved from duty early and could go to the hospital to be with Lily before her surgery. If that hadn't happened, I would have missed those precious hours with her when she needed me most." Tommy paused and looked directly at Ryan. "But here's the part that really changed my life. After Mr. Kim learned about what had happened to me and my daughter, he did something extraordinary." Ryan's face turned red with embarrassment. He hadn't wanted anyone to know about what he had done. Mr. Kim extended his stay in London, even though it cost him money he didn't have and caused problems with his business back home. He came to the hospital to visit my daughter. Not for publicity, not for cameras, but simply because he's a decent human being who cared about a stranger's family. The reporters were frantically taking notes. This was turning into a completely different story than anyone had expected. Tommy smiled as he continued. "Mr. Kim taught my daughter some simple martial arts movements that helped with her physical therapy after surgery. He made her laugh when she was scared and in pain. He showed her that strength isn't about hurting people, it's about helping them." Ryan wiped tears from his eyes. He had visited Lily several times, bringing her small gifts and teaching her gentle exercises that would help her recover. The little girl had reminded him of his own students back home, and he couldn't help but care about her recovery. "Lily is doing great now, thanks partly to the kindness of the man who everyone thought was my attacker," Tommy said. "Mr. Kim and I have become friends through this whole experience. He's even invited my family to visit him in America when Lily is fully recovered." The room erupted with questions, but Tommy held up his hand just like Detective Morrison had done. "I want everyone who shared those videos, everyone who called Mr. Kim names, everyone who judged him without knowing the truth, to understand something important. This man has more honor and character than most people I've ever met. He was willing to sacrifice his own reputation and financial security to help a stranger's family." Tommy turned to Ryan and smiled. "Ryan, would you like to say something?" Ryan stood up slowly and walked to the microphone. His voice was shaky at first, but grew stronger as he spoke. "I want to thank Detective Morrison for finding the truth, and I want to thank Tommy for his kindness and friendship. This whole experience has been the most difficult thing I've ever gone through, but it's also shown me something important about human nature." "What's that?" asked a reporter. "That people are quick to believe the worst about strangers, but they're also capable of incredible kindness once they know the truth. Tommy could have stayed angry with me forever, but instead, he chose to see past the accident and become my friend. That takes real strength and character." Ryan paused and looked out at the crowd of reporters. "I also want to say something to Brad and Danny, the college students who pushed me. I don't hate you. You made a stupid mistake that hurt a lot of people, but you also had the courage to tell the truth when it mattered. I hope you learn from this experience and use it to make better choices in the future." The press conference continued for another hour, with reporters asking questions and taking photos of Ryan and Tommy together. The story that emerged was completely different from the viral videos that had destroyed Ryan's reputation just days earlier. By that evening, The new story was spreading just as fast as the original false one had. Social media was full of people apologizing to Ryan and sharing stories about the importance of not judging others too quickly. The hashtag #DeTwarnTruth about Ryan began trending worldwide. Ryan's business partner Mike called from Portland with incredible news. "Ryan, you're not going to believe this. The phone hasn't stopped ringing, but now it's people wanting to enroll their kids in classes. Parents are saying they want their children to learn from someone who has the character and integrity you showed during this whole mess." 3 months later, Ryan was back home in Portland, teaching martial arts to more students than ever before. His studio had expanded to 2 locations, and he had a waiting list of families who wanted their children to learn not just self-defense, but the values of respect, honor, and helping others. Tommy kept his promise to visit with his family. Lily, now fully recovered from her surgery, got to meet all of Ryan's students and demonstrate the moves he had taught her in the hospital. She told everyone who would listen about how her friend Ryan had helped her feel brave when she was scared. Fidi. Viral videos of the incident were still online, but now they were accompanied by the true story and updates about the friendship between Ryan and Tommy. The incident became a teaching tool about the dangers of rushing to judgment and the power of social media to both destroy and rebuild someone's reputation. Brad and Danny, the college students, faced legal consequences for their actions and were required to do community service. They both wrote public apologies to Ryan and Tommy, and both young men said the experience had changed their perspective on how their actions affect others. Detective Morrison was promoted partly based on her thorough investigation of the case. She often used Ryan's story when training new detectives about the importance of looking deeper than surface evidence. And Tommy continued his work as a royal guard, but with a new perspective on the tourists he protected. He never forgot that sometimes the people who look like troublemakers might actually be the kindest souls you'll ever meet, and that first impressions can be completely wrong. The incident that started as a nightmare for everyone involved ended up bringing together 2 families from different countries, teaching the world about the importance of truth and kindness and proving that even the worst misunderstandings can sometimes lead to the most unexpected friendships. Ryan still keeps in touch with Tommy's family, and every year on the anniversary of Lily's surgery, he sends her a small gift and a photo of his latest students. Because sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the most terrible misunderstandings, and the strongest friendships are forged in the most unexpected circumstances.